greatest challenges of mission drift is that it almost happens naturally. Our default setting is to sway away from our ultimate destination. Even if we think we're on course, we might hear differently from our customers, our team, and others. In fact, a good litmus test for your mission is simply to ask others what they think it is. It can be humbling to see how far their answer is from your own. If you thought you were immune to drifting, you might realize otherwise. And that's okay. The thing is, no one is immune to mission drift. It can happen to all of us. And once we become aware of that, we can start thinking of ways to protect ourselves and our organizations from the dangers it can bring. That's what Peter does in this final episode of the series. In this talk, he gives us some practical ways to stay mission true. Let's dive in.
So if we believe that mission drift is possible for us and the organizations that we care about, the question is, how do we make sure that that is not our story? How do we make sure that in our season of leadership, we are doing everything possible to reinforce our mission and to be an example of an organization that stays true to who we are? So the question is, how do we stay mission true? As we started listening to individuals that had stayed mission true, those individuals that had the courageous decision to not drift, to not compromise, we found time and time again that they had two elements consistently that they did. And the first is they were really clear on their mission. They were not leaving it to something that they hoped would happen. They were not leaving it to something that they just assumed would happen, but they said, we've got to make sure that we get this down. This is who we are. As Simon Sinek writes, he says, you got to be real clear about your why. And organizations that stayed on mission, they knew that the gospel mattered. There was no gray area. There was no ambiguity. The gospel matters. Their mission matters. They wrote it down, they reinforced it, they lived it out in the day-to-day decisions. They were clear about who they are and why that matters. But writing it down is a good spot. But the real challenge is then, how do we live it out? How do we live it out in the day-to-day decisions? How do we be intentional? And I've come to realize there is no neutral decisions. Every decision is an invitation to either slowly compromise, slowly drift, or to reinforce our mission and to look at every decision through the lens of saying, will this help us to become a truer version of ourselves? I think about the importance of clarity in a story of contrasting benefactors. Two individuals that were titans of industry, two individuals that were at the top of their game. But one individual, his name was J. Howard Pugh. He was famous for his work in the oil industry. He was the founder of Sun Oil that became Sunoco. He was passionate follower of Jesus. He was actively in partnership with Billy Graham, launching a number of universities, a number of theological institutions. He actually was involved in the founding of Christianity Today, and he was an individual that was living out his faith in his philanthropy in everything that he did. There's another story of a similar individual that also was a titan of industry. His name was Henry Kroll, maybe a little bit less known than J. Howard Pugh, but he also was an individual that was at the top of his game in industry. He made his funds in Quaker Mills, became Quaker Oats. He was also an incredible advocate for the church's engagement in some of the most pressing problems of our world. He was passionate about eradicating the red light district in Chicago. He gave at least 70% of his funds away. And he also had a partnership with a well-known evangelist, Dwight Moody, and together they did so much in outreach. But the question is, where are their estates today? And have they retained the same passion of their founders? There was a couple individuals that reached out to the Pew Charitable Trust that comes from J. Howard Pugh, and they looked at what the Pew Charitable Trust was giving to today, and they found there was a disconnect. The two are not the same, and some of the institutions, some of the work that is done seems disconnected with the passions of J. Howard Pugh. But the president of the Charitable Trust said this. She said, Howard was a man of strong convictions, and his successors on our board are following in his tradition by having strong convictions. Now, that seems to be a little bit of mental gymnastics to make the argument that they are still on mission, because the question is not, do you have strong convictions, but what are those strong convictions? There is clear misalignment between the passions of J. Howard Pugh and what his estate is being used for today. And I truly believe, after doing research, that if he knew what his funds were going to be used for, He would have wished that he never had them or that he had given all of them away in his lifetime. But a key challenge is that he never wrote down all of the guardrails, all of the constraints that he had. But a story of contrast is Henry Kroll. Henry Kroll saw and believed that mission drift was possible. And in a story of contrast, he did write down what his passions are. He did have a charter. He did say, this is what I want, not just now, but as long as these resources are able to be used, I want to make sure that they are used within this intent of advancing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And today, the giving priorities are still very much in alignment with the passions that he had. And a key piece of this is because there was clarity. When we look at that story, when we look at the contrast, it comes down to two simple things. It comes down to clarity of mission and then intentionality of practice. And the challenge for all of us is, how do we see the small decisions that we are making today? How do we see them as an invitation to reinforce our mission? How do we see the importance of the systems that we have in place to recruit and retain individuals that are fully in alignment with our core mission? How do we think about the metrics? How do we think about measurement? And are we measuring what matters most? How do we think about the stories that we tell and what we celebrate as an individual? How do we make sure that the way in which we are governed is in alignment with our mission? It is a connection to the big picture mission, to the day-to-day decisions, and there are examples of courageous leaders that are doing it. There are so many amazing examples of leaders that have done the work to clarify their mission and then to figure out how they connect that mission to the day-to-day decisions. These mission true leaders, these men and women, are having the courage to say, our mission happens, and on my watch, we are not going to drift. I had a recent example of a mission true leader that surprised me, but it was an individual who was an executive with the YMCA. And the YMCA has experienced significant drift. And this individual acknowledged that. And he said that a few years ago, he was doing a project on his particular Y. He said, we took down a plaster wall. We were doing a renovation project. And he said, we found the original charter of why we began the YMCA. He said he read that document, he read the passion, he read the full mission to share the good news, the love of Jesus Christ. And he said, I wept because I realized we had drifted. We had lost our way. We had lost our mission. But instead of just being discouraged, he said, I'm going to figure out a way to reinvigorate the C back into the YMCA. He said, I'm going to figure out a way to still figure out a way of creatively returning to our roots. And he is doing the hard work to say, let's rediscover a creative way to reintegrate our faith, to reintegrate our faith in Jesus into the work that we do. And he is doing it. I celebrate that. And so whether you are a part of an organization that has experienced drift, I pray that you have the courage to roll up your sleeves and dive in to return to that original mission. Or if you're a leader that still has not experienced drift, I pray that you have the ability right now to say, let's do the work. Let's do the work right now to say, we are not going to drift. May God bless you in that work, and may we see more and more examples of mission true leaders and mission true organizations.
Becoming a mission true leader happens with a series of small practices that you do every day. I love the clarity of Peter's 2 takeaways. Be clear about your mission and be intentional in your practice. Faith-driven entrepreneurs are people passionate about their missions. You believe your organization can do good for the people it serves. And if you're watching this video, I bet that you took on all the risk and responsibility of starting a business because you had some sense that the world would be better with the product or services you provide. That's a beautiful thing. And it's worth protecting your core mission, your why. And protection takes intentionality. Where might you be compromising your mission? How can you instill practices that keep you mission true? Who are the people that help keep you accountable? If you've gone through this in a faith-driven entrepreneur group, we hope that this can be a place where you help each other on your journeys. And if you've watched it alone, we encourage you to find that community. Check out our website to learn more about the groups we offer. This can be the first intentional step you take to remain mission true. Now, talk about these things in your group or reflect on your own. See how the series relates to the journey you're on. Open yourselves up to learning from one another. Be transparent and honest with each other. What you get out of this time together will only be as enriching and life-giving as what you put into it. Thanks for tuning into this series. We'll see you next time.